Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for attending our webinar today about generative AI in education. I am going to go ahead and post a request that we have for you, and it is just a request. So if you could go ahead, we invite you to use the chat to add your name, your location, your position, and or what brings you to this webinar today. What are some things you may hope to get out of the conversation that the panelists are having, or questions or ideas that you hope that the panelists attend to? We are going to use the chat today for several things. First of all, for you to be able to communicate with each other as you're hearing really interesting information. So if you have resources or experiences or just thoughts about some of the information that you're hearing, we welcome you to use the chat to share those with each other. And when we send out a follow-up email, we can sort of collect some of those resources and information and share them out with everybody. We are only going to use the Q&A function today for questions that you have for the panelists. So please reserve your questions for the Q&A function because that's what I'll be using for that. Just going to give you one more bit or two more bits of housekeeping. The first is that this webinar is being recorded and will be made available through the College of Education and Human Ecology's YouTube channel. And the second is that our agenda for today, we will start off with our panelists introducing themselves, and then we'll have a couple of rounds of questions that they will respond to. And then I'm going to pause and then open it up for your Q&A. So you'll have a little bit of time to hear some information before you add your questions to the Q&A button. And then we may go back to the panelists for a third final round of questions and then back for engagement with you. So we look forward to interacting and engaging with you today. And thank you for using the chat to share, name, location, your position, and or what brings you to the webinar today. So we're going to go ahead and get started by having our panelists introduce themselves. And we are going to go in the order that we see on the screen. So I'm going to start with my colleague, Ana Paula.
Hello, everyone. Happy to be here. My name is Ana Paula Correa, and I'm a professor of learning technologies here at Ohio State in the College of Education and Human Ecology. I'm also the director of the Center on Education Training for Employment, which is one of the centers under the college. I can see some of my colleagues in the chat. So just happy to be here, and most importantly, looking forward to learn from my colleagues in the panel and all of you in the chat. Thank you, Dietra, for getting this panel organized.
Oh, absolutely. Karen, we're going to pass it to you.
Nice. I'm Karen French. I'm in the College of Education at the University of Texas at Austin. I'm the Associate Director of the Office of Instructional Innovation. My sort of specialization within that role is in teacher education. I'm particularly interested in digital literacy and how we help teachers learn how to teach digital literacy to children. So my angle with ChatGPT and generative AI is how we think about that in teaching young children.
Thank you. Sean.
Hi, my name is Sean Hickey, and I am the Deputy Director for the Assessment Program at The Ohio State University's Center on Education and Training for Employment. I work with Dr. Correa. I'm also a PhD candidate in the Learning Technologies program. And basically, generative AI and ChatGPT just crosses all of my interest areas between learning technologies and how we can use AI in assessment. So I'm happy to share what I've learned and just keep learning from everybody else about this exciting topic.
Thank you, Sean. And I'm Dietra Price-Dennis. I am the Director of Digital Education and Innovation and Technology at the College of Education here at Ohio State, the Ohio State University. I'm going to go ahead and pass it to my other colleague, and I'll be your facilitator, moderator for today's panel. I'm going to pass it to our final panelist, Ian.
Hey everybody, Ian O'Byrne. I'm a literacy educator and researcher. I'm at the College of Charleston in South Carolina. I routinely build and break things online and blog about it. And so, as Sean just indicated, this is a very interesting, intriguing development that we've been seeing build over a number of years, and now it's really impacting a lot of our society. So interested in learning from everybody and figure out what value we see in this and what interest we might have. So looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much. I want to just note that when I reached out to all of the panelists and said, I think it'd be a great idea if we created a panel for our students, cross institutions. Would you be interested in participating? They all enthusiastically said yes, and probably could have invited a bunch more people to sit on this panel. So I just want to say thank you in advance to our panelists, and thank you to all of the students who are taking some time out of your day to join us this afternoon. We're going to go ahead and start with the panelists having a conversation around this particular question. What are the top 3 ideas about generative AI that students or educators or anyone on this call today in education should know? And panelists, feel free to jump in however feels comfortable for you. I won't call on you this time.
Oh, I was expecting you to call us. So if it's okay, I'm just going to follow the order of the introductions. And is that okay if I start? So I have 3 very simple ideas. One is generative AI is here to stay. So let's just all embrace this idea. One can sanction and police the use of a generative AI tool like ChatGPT, but there's always ways to go around, which is true with most of digital technologies. And I want to remind you that in 1972, Hewlett-Packard released the first scientific calculator, the HP 35. A similar reaction occurred. Even though the calculator made advanced calculations accessible to many, people accuse it of undermining mathematical skills. And now we all carry a scientific calculator on our smartphones. So do you want me to move to the next thought, Deidre?
No, we're gonna go ahead and do like a round robin here and get
Okay.
Sean and Ian and Karen to jump in on this question if they'd like to.
Well, I can kind of piggyback on that a little bit and just say that I think one of the big ideas is to think of AI as a tool, and generative AI specifically. It's not just about having it do the work for you. It's not just about cheating. It in fact can be used effectively to improve knowledge and to help students across all levels. And so the knee-jerk reaction of it's something we need to be worried about is, I think, the wrong perspective, and instead it's something that I think we can all be positive and optimistic about because it presents more opportunities than worries, at least in my view.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that. I mean, this is something that, I mean, when we see ChatGPT spitting out responses, there is a very natural like, oh no, you know, where is this going to head? We need to have those discussions. We need to have those discussions and ask those big questions. But what ends up happening is, and we do this routinely with technology, when we see new technologies make advances in society as educators, we clamp down, we privilege some forms of learning over others. We automatically assume that students are just going to use it to cheat. And instead, we don't problematize and think deeply about our own pedagogies, the tools we use in our classroom, what counts, what doesn't count. But we need to have discussion about these technologies. As been already stated, these are here to stay, but we need to really talk about how might we use them more effectively? What should we use? What should we not use? We should think about equity and access and power and privilege in the use of these tools. We should ask questions about the motivations behind the companies and corporations that are foisting them upon us. My fear is that, as we did with the internet in the classroom and as we've done with most other technologies in teaching and learning spaces, is that we will spend our time spinning our wheels and like hamstrung about what we could and should do, and then all of a sudden we blink and these technologies are everywhere, and then we have then it's expected that we only use certain technologies or certain tools or certain products. Case in point, our use of Zoom now. Prior to COVID, most of us didn't use Zoom, and now Zoom is pretty much national infrastructure. And so we should have broad questions about why we use these tools, or should we use these tools?
And I think to piggyback on what y'all are saying, it's not that it's just here to stay. It's that the technology that came before it was already here. Most of us just weren't noticing it. So generative AI is building on technology that is 10 years old, 20 years old, 30 years old. And we just didn't know that it was there. And now we know it's there. There's a hype cycle that makes us really excited about it. And we're all seeing it. And I think there were those of us who saw these things that came before. And not everybody has to jump on board it right now, but those of us who are interested in it should look at it really critically. And Ana Paula, when you were talking about the calculators, I remember being in junior high and everybody being really worried that somebody was going to have a calculator on their watch. And then being a teacher in the 90s and sort of thinking through how that shift came in place and watching those calculators starting to be required. So thinking about the technology from the perspective of over time, how we adopt and don't get excited about hype cycles and can think about things critically is really where we want to come from. And I think my big point that I think all of y'all are getting at, the focus on academic integrity is sort of beside the point. How do we think about it critically, use what we can use, and critique the things that need to be critiqued? The one thing that I haven't heard so far that I wanted to add and wanted to hear what y'all have to say about it is the notion of garbage in, garbage out. What's coming out of ChatGPT is information that's been gleaned from the web that is worth critiquing. So the faces that I see, what are y'all thinking about that too? When I say garbage in, garbage out, how do you react? Or do I need to say more?
Oh, there was something that I wanted to include for the second question, but I can.
Okay, well, that we
share
can
with
use
you.
it. Are we
no,
finished with the first
no.
section and do you want to go into
We
the
should
second?
No,
not move.
Hold on 1 second. I want to just say two
Okay.
things. First, I love
Please.
that question, and I did see reactions. So Ian or Sean, or Ana Paula, if you have a reaction to the garbage in and garbage out, go for it, and then we can move to the second question. But I definitely
okay.
want to make sure that gut reaction you had to Karen's thought, you definitely share it. Go for it.
Yeah, I think it's all, I know, everything as educators, everything in life is about education. So education is key. And I believe it's of critical importance to educate ourselves as educators and then our students on the capabilities and limitations of tools, for example, ChatGPT. So one thing that I've learned as I go through this education by experimenting extensively with the tool is that there's garbage coming out, as Karen mentioned. Often ChatGPT inserts text with fabricated statistics and quotes from non-existing sources. So I like kind of a warning, especially for the students in the audience, to always check your sources and the accuracy of the information delivered by the ChatGPT output, or as Karen puts it, sometimes garbage. That kind of was my reaction.
Well,
Did you hear what
Thank you, Ana
OpenAI
Paula.
calls that, by the way? They call them hallucinations. Refer to them as hallucinations. ChatGPT, or they call it GPT hallucinations.
I love it.
I do too.
Well, and I actually think that those hallucinations really present a great opportunity for engaging students in critical thinking and some digital literacy skills that, honestly, based on the discourse we see on social media, are clearly lacking in a lot of people. And so there's a really great opportunity to encourage people to use it for research and then research the output, research what you get and find out what level of garbage it is and how much is a hallucination on ChatGPT's part. Because I think, like I said, I think it's an opportunity that we miss by just saying, you can't trust the results, and instead say, like Dr. Cray said, when you get the results, now you have to do the research and see what's right and what's wrong.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I've been doing is looking at the individual tools and trying to figure out how are they getting the information they're spitting out. So we've used the term ChatGPT several times here. One of the things to keep in mind is that ChatGPT is GPT 3.5. It's by OpenAI. It's by one company that up until GPT-4 was relatively open and sharing what they're doing and where they're getting the data. So ChatGPT and GPT 3.5, for all intents and purposes, it had a relatively limited sample size. It had data. They're scraping Reddit, they're scraping open book repositories, and they're getting that, and that's where they're getting the information from. The previous iterations of GPT by OpenAI could not search the web. So you're right. There's been a lot of bad places online. Okay, we'll just leave it at that. And some of those are involved in Reddit. I adore Reddit, but we've gone through a bad place at different times with Reddit. And so all of that is in that data set. And so the thing to keep in mind is that, one, new versions, new iterations are coming out. So with GPT-4 and beyond, now it's able to start actively searching the web. But then also keep in mind that GPT and ChatGPT is one company here. And so I think it's important to think about, okay, what are the companies that are building these things? What are the purposes? What are the motivations? Where is the money coming and going? Why are they building this? My friend and yours, Elon Musk, last week, there was a lot of clutching of the pearls, thinking about whether or not we could and should slow down progress on this. And then 20 minutes later, a number of these individuals come out and now they're building their own. So we have to keep in mind that this is a business. This is, this is the business of the future. So we need to think about what the tools are, what the techs are, where the information's coming from, and then what do we want to do about those elements?
Well, the interesting thing I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry, go for it, Karen. No, go for it.
I was going to say, building on what he's talking about, with ChatGPT, and it's free and OpenAI is giving it to us to use, they're using us to make their tool better.
Yeah.
It's called reinforcement learning with human feedback. It makes that a better tool. So when they opened it really wide and they made the hype cycle really big, they got a lot of users to go in and make the thing that they created, which cost a lot of money, better for free for them. So making foundation models, which are what generative AI is based on, costs an awful lot to produce, costs an awful lot to run. IBM is talking about how much these things cost to run. The databases upon which the data they gather is an enormous amount of data, and that's really costly. But when OpenAI went in and got the data, that was data they could get freely available. And what they then did was go in and say, okay, we're going to get all the people to do this work for us for free. So it's actually a really smart model on their part, but we can be smart and be educated consumers of that data as well. The other thing they say is, okay, well, if you put your information in, you write this stuff, you put in your information to ask your questions, that's also making their model better. So it's sort of a two-way street. And if we are, that's one of my responses to question 2, but we have to be educated consumers all the way along.
Thank you for that.
Stuff. Yeah, I'm going to let you go forward.
No. I think I could just let y'all keep talking and talking. But do you want me to throw the second question out? Because it feels like this has just been such a natural segue. Now, if I changed up the order and this isn't the second question, y'all just go with the second question you have. So what are the top 3 questions you have, or you believe educators or students in education should be asking about generative AI? And it feels like you've already started to go down that path around, here's what we know or what we see happening. So logically, what question should we be asking as consumers or users? I'm not even sure how to phrase it at the moment, depending on if you have a paid subscription.
I have thought about this question that when you send in advance to get us prepared for this panel, and I have a what question, an how question, and the why question. So my what question is related to what is already been discussed. And I'm just going to use ChatGPT as an example. In simple words, ChatGPT is an artificial language model that generates text by analyzing input data. So my question is, what are some of the problems and limitations of generative AI in education? ChatGPT does an impressive job, but it's not a real being or a companion. It's a language model, and it comes with a series of limitations in addition to a large corporation behind the tool that Ian made us very aware of that. So one of the limitations, and I'm just talking about ChatGPT as an example, is it cannot afford information dated before September 2021. So if you want to do research a topic before the internet, such as the 1968 flu pandemic, there's not going to be many digital sources with original data that ChatGPT can access to. Along the same lines, it often includes references that don't exist. And what is interesting is the reference, they read very credible, but the moment you go deep and research those references, they don't exist anywhere. So I guess I'm going to stop you with my what question, then I can carry on with how and the why question later on.
Okay, let's have Karen, Sean, or Ian jump in.
I think what you go, Sean.
Okay, I was just going to say, I think the one question that I think of related to education and these generative AI tools is, what are the conversations that educators are having with students, and how are we setting boundaries, and where are those lines? And I know that, you have tools that allegedly can detect ChatGPT generated content, but then there are additional tools that you can run your text through to make it seem like it was written by a human, or intentionally add some spelling errors or something. I'm not exactly sure how they work. I kind of don't want to know, but it's a conversation that we should be having of, like, what are the expectations, and how can we really think about assessments with ChatGPT in mind, instead of saying, don't use this tool, but answer this question. Say, how can you use this tool to help you create a better answer to this question? So that's one of the big questions I think we should be talking about, is how are we discussing this with students?
One of the things that I've just started looking at closely, like in the last few days, is prompt tuning or prompt engineering, where we focus more on what their questions are. So if we're fighting students and saying, please don't use ChatGPT, and we try to outsmart them all the time, it's always head to head, we're going to fight each other. But if instead we say, why don't we use the tool, but come up with a really good question for the tool, actually sort of crafting the right question to get a decent answer could be a really interesting exercise in and of itself. And that's some of the work that young people are doing themselves as corporate world workers. So it's real world work, and it helps them understand this is how the tool works. It doesn't have the right answer every time. It helps explain hallucinations. It helps explain the limitations of the tool. It helps explain that, oh, by the way, this doesn't include the stuff that's paywalled. So there are going to be additional citations that we're going to have to go to find, but let's engineer the question so that you get the answer that you want. And instead of having to always try to outsmart them, leverage that need to be really smart with the technology. I like where you're thinking about that a lot, but we're never going to outsmart our students because it takes too much energy and it's negative anyway. Why not be on the same side with them?
I love that. Ian, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that it's a lot of this, to me, a lot of this discussion comes down to a question of privilege. And so, most of our systems are built on this ability to read and write in, for the most part, standard academic English. And so we judge students that are coming into our programs based upon GPAs and writing samples and how they do in interviews. And now we got a tool that can pretty much knock that out pretty easily. So now I'm in literacy. A lot of my literacy colleagues are freaked out that it's going to just replace all of that, and what counts doesn't count anymore. And so, I think I have large questions about ethics and responsibility. We were supposed to have those discussions when we looked at online reading comprehension and Google Docs and Zoom and everything. We didn't have those discussions. I have questions about how we can enhance and modify teaching and learning. We were supposed to have those discussions. We did not have those discussions previously. I have questions about accessibility and access. Once again, we didn't have those discussions previously. And so what I'm doing is, as Sean said, I'm having talks with my pre-service teachers. I'm talking to them about what value they see in this. I am also, as an educator, as a researcher, I'm trying to have discussions with my colleagues about what I do. So I have an on-campus technology conference every year, and I wanted to submit a session about generative AI and virtual AI assistants. So I used ChatGPT to write my proposal for the session. And I put together the proposal, I submitted it, I immediately emailed my department and I said, hey, this is a GPT-3. So if you're going to blow me up, blow me up. But it was really interesting seeing. It got accepted, by the way, so it'll be coming up soon. So if you want to be there, but it was really interesting seeing the response from colleagues. And so I think this is bringing about questions about what counts. So if I'm using, if I'm writing a piece for submission, and I'm using it to help me write a blog post title, or if I'm using it to help me think about my writing, as Karen said before, these technologies have been here for a while, but now because they're more overt and we can interact with them more, we're a little bit freaked out. But we don't seem to have a problem with tools like Grammarly. My colleagues that would be the first ones to complain about ChatGPT, they're like, oh, I pay for like Grammarly Pro. And I'm like, you're doing the same thing. The online search, the keyword search, or the instant search on Google, that's been around for a long time. A lot of these generative tools, a lot of these AI tools, AI tools have been bringing you your Netflix next queue, your Amazon purchases. This stuff's been here for a while, but now we have the opportunity to be involved. As Karen said, we're teaching the machines, so we got to talk about that. But I think that more dialogue is needed. We need to have these bigger discussions and try to make sense of what this means for us, for our society, for our classrooms.
Well, and just to piggyback on that very briefly, I think you make an excellent point about where you draw the line and trying to find a distinction that I honestly am not sure is even there. But you think about tools like Microsoft Office that just announced a month ago that they have a ChatGPT or GPT based copilot that's going to be baked into all of their Office applications. So now you don't even have to go somewhere else. Office Word will be suggesting edits and writing new paragraphs for you. And at what point do how do you draw the line and say, this is my intellectual work and this is the work of a computer? These are conversations that I think we need to be having to kind of figure out what the line is and honestly, how can we best use these tools so that we can move on to sort of bigger, better things?
And I know that this is not being recorded and nobody knows where I work, but one of my first faculty senate meetings in the fall, people stood up and said, we need to ban ChatGPT. And I was like, oh, here we go, and I said, okay, why don't we spend more time thinking about how we might use this in teaching and learning? But the truth of the matter is that horse has left the barn. Like blocking, first of all, you cannot block ChatGPT. Okay. And yes, we have tools that can sort of scan for it and look at data. But now that Microsoft has been for years in business with OpenAI, we're going to see these new tools already built into Edge, already built into Bing, already built in Microsoft Office. Notion, for those of you that use Notion, already has AI tools. So these tools are going to automatically be baked into what we have. So as soon as our systems move over to Microsoft 365 and everything else, it's already going to be built into that. And for those that are using Google Docs, it's on the way. It's not as good, but it's on the way.
All right, I'm going to pause for 1 second to put some questions out there. We have 4 in the chat, and then we have a few that were submitted ahead of time. So I'm going to start with the one that we had submitted ahead of time. And it feels like you all were already kind of walking down this path, but I want to give you a second to talk more explicitly around this. And if, again, panelists jump in as you feel free or feel interested in for these questions. You don't all have to answer all of them. I'm not sure if you all can hear it, but in Ohio, we have our noon tornado siren going off. So I apologize if you can hear that right now. How can ChatGPT maximize our experiences without underestimating our agency? So that was one of our pre-submitted questions. And I'm wondering if you have thoughts about that.
Well, I can kind of start if if no one else has any thoughts. I think that uh, and kind of just getting back to having those discussions with how we can use it with students. I think maximizing our capabilities is a piece that these tools have, have an opportunity to really help us or help students, find their weaknesses and improve upon them. So rather than having ChatGPT write an essay, you can have it help you create an outline that is a logical argument, because some students struggle with how to present their arguments logically and how to use reason. You can help with, if you, especially if you are writing in a language that is not your first language, using ChatGPT to improve your writing skills, or find ways that maybe you're missing the grammar, but the ideas are still your own, and you're just able to use ChatGPT honestly the same way that we might use a tutor or some other support tool to lift us up. And I think every student has that opportunity to improve their writing skills and their logic and reasoning skills by having ChatGPT assist them with some of these subtasks and pre-writing tasks.
I would like to address, go ahead, Karen.
Well, go ahead and finish, because mine wasn't exactly ChatGPT, it was GPT itself.
I'd like to address the question about agency that our participant asked. I think one of the key areas where ChatGPT can help is with automating administrative tasks that our students deal with as part of their college experience, like organizing calendars, providing detailed course information, writing email drafts to faculty and staff. This allows students to free up valuable time and to take that time to focus on reflecting on their world around them, their life experiences, and about themselves. So my argument is that time to reflect and develop our inner selves by pursuing creative endeavors, athletic interests, or other interests that we have not been able to do because of lack of time. Now, because some of these administrative tasks are being handled by a virtual assistant, we can take this time and really deepen our critical thinking skills to critique, for instance, experience with AI. So that was my thought when I heard that question. Appreciate that, the person that put that question ahead of time. Thank you.
I really like it. That's a good response. I was going to say, related to it, there's a tool that leverages GPT, and it's called ChatPDF. Have y'all seen it? ChatPDF, what it does is it allows you to upload. I would do it with an open access PDF. you upload the PDF and then you can ask questions about what's in the PDF, and it will pull the information from that PDF or from the web. So if it's something that that's just right at the edge of your level of expertise, and you need to ask questions about some of the concepts in there, you can go in there and ask questions about it. So in my personal life, I'm really interested in the immune system, and I'm not great with T cells. So if I'm reading an article about the immune system and I'm not sure why a T cell is called a T cell, I can ask the question, why is a T cell called a T cell? And it will pull from the web what a T cell is and what the history of it is. And it will tell me which page in the PDF that concept is mentioned. And it's a really great way of reading something that's right on your ability to understand it and get the information that you need really quickly. I really like it a lot.
The question about, yes, I agree. I love Chat PDF. I think one of the things, this is one of the large questions that has me staying up at night, is this idea of what's the value of this and access. And Pat asked it in the chat, asking about, students finding like love and joy in creation. So, as they write, one of the things that keeps me, that has me concerned about the future, is this difference between like a maker and a manager. So there's an old document, I think it's from a worker at Google, I have it on my blog somewhere, that said, for individuals like us in this room, we need to think about our schedule and how much time we have blocked off so that we can make and create and build brand new things, and how much time of our day is spent managing, sending out those advising emails or putting out fires and all these different minutiae of our job that just becomes onerous. I'm sure all of you do very important things on a daily basis, but for me, I have some things I have to deal with. And so one of the things I'm wondering is, what do these virtual assistants, how can they empower us? How can they automate some of these pieces so that we can do a better job? But then also, where's the line between making and managing, and what will that look like in the future? So one of the concerns that I have is that in a classroom, as we brainstorm or we pre-write, or in a business when we have like a marketing agency come together, or when our school puts together like a social media plan, you bring minds into the building and try to figure out what direction you want to head, or you'd brainstorm ideas for a paper. My concern is that instead you'll have a smaller number of people that will sort of say, well, let's see what the AI assistant says. And then now what will end up happening is that we will review the submissions, presented by this virtual assistant, and then figure out which ones are the best fit. So then in a way, the maker manager becomes, the maker now, the generator of ideas is the AI tool. And then the human beings, now we're getting managed by that tool. So there's one of those areas that I have concerns, is thinking about, okay, how can I use this so that I or my students are still in charge? There are wonderfully creative things that you can do using these AI tools. Okay, there's wonderful ways that you could build, create, expand. There's ways that you can use them to, mitigate some of those other tasks. But one of the things that I think that we need to think about, and then also we need to think about our future students, students that are in our classroom, is who's doing the making and who's doing the managing here. Okay, and what value structures do we place upon that?
Oh my goodness, I can't believe we're almost out of time. I'm going to pivot to one question from the Q&A. And what I will do, folks, who submitted questions in the Q&A, is share these with our panelists, and as they have time, they can respond to those and we'll share them back out. So I want to say thank you for submitting those in the Q&A. But there is a question that I actually wanted you all to expand on a little bit more, because it seemed to get some traction, and that was it's our second question from another Ian, and that's, what are some general or specific tips you have for prompt engineering and getting the most out of one input from an LLM? And I'm specifically thinking the students on the call right now could really benefit from hearing any suggestions you have around that.
At least for my experience in creating a prompt, first of all, owning the knowledge that there is no perfect prompt and you can iterate on your prompt because it's conversational. The interface is conversational. But before I even start thinking about a prompt to kind of try to think about what are the specific aspects that I'm looking for. Is there a grade level that I want the response to be? Is there a specific length? Is there a type of writing? You know, do I want language that would be appropriate for a brochure or for a website or for an academic paper? So put all of that into the prompt. There's probably technically some sort of character limit, but as far as I've experienced, there's no real limit into what you can shove into the prompt. So you can even put, I want it to sound like this paragraph, but I want it to be on this topic at this level. And just the more information you can provide, the closer you can get to an output that feels like what you want. At least that's been my experience.
And I will add to that because Sean and I have been working on experimenting with prompt engineering. Is you have to go and try. Right now, if a student submits an essay about ChatGPT that was mostly generated by ChatGPT, and if the prompt is write me an essay about ChatGPT, because we've been doing this for 4 months now, I recognize that is a ChatGPT output. So we really need to put our intellectual creativity into the creation of that input into the language model. So I agree with Sean, because we've been talking about this, really being specific, mention the audience, the length of the output, the context where your question is taking place, the number of arguments or comparisons or contrasts you want get out as part of output.
Yeah.
The other thing
Karen
is
and
that these technologies are going to change. These technologies will iterate. In my doc program, we were researching online reading comprehension, and my advisor would often, in talks they would give at conferences, talk about those students that foolishly would type like Britney Spears up in the URL bar, the search bar, the address bar. And then because human beings could not adapt, then the technology, the developers adapted the technology to us. And so one of the reasons you saw GPT release that sandbox is because they needed human beings were super awkward, super weird to interact with the tools. One of the things that I would suggest is, as been hinted at here, and I know that many of us were on a research call a couple of weeks ago where this idea was unearthed, is I would love to sit down with a group of kids, adolescents, middle grade students, or K-12, and see what they can create. Put these generative tools in front of them, and let's see what we can create and build, and kick the tires, push those different terms, look at different modalities that they can play with, because I think that we don't fully understand that's going to change, but we need to be thinking about what we can ultimately create with that, and how far can we push these devices.
Karen, do you want to have the last word here?
No, actually, Ian did it really nicely. I have to say that I am newer to understanding prompt engineering than the other folks. And so I'm still at the point, maybe closer to where our audience is just trying to gather all of the information. And maybe the thing that I have to add is it is really hard to keep up with the technology. It changes so quickly. The new thing comes out, the new tool comes out, somebody else changes it up, and find people that you can follow online or wherever that you can kind of say, okay, what's coming next? Because in another 6 months, if you've read that, if you've read all of it in 6 months, all of it's going to be changed again, and try to figure out what you need to do. The other thing I think that we all need to keep in mind is we all don't have to do all of it right now. Find out what is going to impact you, deal with that, and then realize the world's going to be okay if you don't do everything.
I
So I don't have
appreciate
to
that
prompt
as our
engineer right now.
I appreciate that as our closing remarks. First of all, everyone, please give a hand to our incredibly brilliant, thoughtful, and at times funny panelists. That was more for you, Ian, than everyone else. And I also want to say that the panelists have also put some links in the chat if you want to look at them anytime soon. I added a few as well from the panelists that they had shared previously. And Karen, I just will say at the very last point, TikTok has been such a wealth of information with people sharing prompt engineering. And so that's part of what I want to do tonight, or plan to do tonight in my class with my students, is go down that path. So thank you all so much for sharing information, for being available to us, for participating in this cross-institutional collaboration. Please, those of you on the call, look for more webinars and opportunities to continue this conversation. And I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your day. Take care.
Thank you, Deidre, for getting us together.
Yes, thank you. This is great.
Thank you, Deidre.